He always thought of me as someone who was the symbol of violence. Of course, I never knew this when I worked with him, because we never had words, we never had anything of that kind of nonsense. Nor did Sandy have with anybody else. He was a perfect gentleman.
Well, only film buffs really know him. He's really almost unknown as far as mainstream directors. Directors of his time are being forgotten anyway. I mean, kids today don't even know who John Ford was.
Terribly Scottish, stubbornly Scottish. That's what I think is so sad. He's a very honest, direct man, which I like to imagine most Scotsmen are. And you can't be too honest and too direct in the film industry.
I think he taught me the value of film, of the honor of making film, of dealing with that magical instrument and the realization of certain visions, the solidifying of dreams, that responsibility. I don't think there's anything that anybody can do that's more important than make films.
I remember at the time, I couldn't imagine how anyone could have a string of hits comparable to what a man like Alexander Mackendrick had. And I can remember when I finally met him, I believe that's the very first thing I asked him. How do you manage a string like that, Mackendrick? And he said, how do you think? And I believe I said, you must know when to walk away. And he smiled.
33, take one.
Thank you very much. And if they run the Indy 500 tomorrow, the traffic won't be any worse than it is right out there on the freeways today.
This is Venice, California. What they're showing tonight is a student film, the kind that can take half a lifetime to complete. It's a student of Sandy Mackendrick's, and he needs to know what Sandy thinks.
What Sandy Mackendrick did for myself and my classmates was he was the first cold water we were hit with, and he prepared us how to face the business.
It's so funny because, I mean, when you see a film like this, it tells you so much about yourself as a person.
In teaching, he forces you to look at the material, analyze the material, write, rewrite, throw it away. As he quotes Clifford Odets, who said, screenplays aren't written, they are rewritten.
What happened was he came here, and by the sort of macho herd in Hollywood was really run over. They really trod on him, I think. And I don't think his sensitivity and the delicateness of what he can do was respected.
Danny Kaye is making a comeback, and Anne Margaret is looking for...
Nationality is a very confusing thing. I was born in America. Indeed, I was conceived in Hollywood, downtown. But my parents were Scots. My father, followed by his girlfriend, had both run away from my grandparents in Glasgow and came here, and they were married here, and I was conceived here, but my mother hated Los Angeles. I've always thought that perhaps my reactions to Hollywood are partly prenatal. So she went back to Boston. I was born there, and then my father died in Philadelphia in the great flu epidemic, and I was carted back to Scotland at the age of about 6. But the blood is Scots, and the temperament is Scots, and I feel Scots, although I am indeed 100% American. I was interested in theatre design and was a walk-on player at the Scottish National Players for a short while, in which I'd made a huge and terribly important discovery, which is I have no talent at all as an actor.
Mackendrick's family had hoped that he'd be a portrait painter, maybe even a great portrait painter. But during the Depression years, he quit Glasgow Art School, and he went into advertising.
I used my skill as an illustrator in doing sit-up sketches to parlay myself into the director's chair, really. And I've always done drawing, which is my equivalent of writing, really, because I think in terms of images. But once I've done the drawings, I hardly ever keep to them, because I regard them really as my rehearsals. And the great sort of fallacy is the idea that careful pre-planning like that in some way ties you down. It doesn't, it frees you.
Mackendrick wasn't the kind of man who planned out his career, let alone a career in the movies, but he did write a script with his cousin, and they managed to sell it to Gaumont British Studios.
They took this story, they took the central idea, but then they handed it to a professional screenwriter who rewrote it entirely. But we went to the first night, Roger and I sat together. I do remember that later Roger and I wondered whether, if they'd followed the story closely, whether it would have made a much difference. And we decided, yes, it would have been even worse. It was a terrible film. I remember with great pleasure the opening lines of the screenplay. It described a black screen. Film students love black screens. And the first line said that 4 headlamps stabbed the darkness. And then there followed a big chase with a big smash, and somebody's killed and so on. That's the beginning of the story. Well, there we were, and we saw our credit on the screen, and there was the black screen, but 1 headlamp stabbed the darkness. And it was a motorbike that came down and slowed down, rather, and the star, Charles Farrell, got off the bicycle, spending a rather long time leaning it up against a phone booth, and went inside and had 5 minutes of conversation. And from then on, the connection with our original story was minimal. But it was an introduction to the movie business.
Central 7000. Daily World? Yes? Mr. Stevens. Hold on, sir. You're through to Mr. Gaunt, sir.
Hello. Yeah. Oh, Graham? What?
I'll tell you more about it when I get back. It's true, I tell you. It's the biggest story that ever happened. Well, now, wait for me.
All right. That brother of yours has gone nuts again.
I should worry. I'm a newspaper girl myself.
What's that you say about November the 5th?
I said if there's anybody alive after midnight November the 5th to read it, I can't stop now, they're after me.
When the Second World War broke out, Mackendrick wasn't called up because he was American, but he volunteered anyway to make propaganda films.
We hold our discussion groups quite informally, you know, but it does help if we can get someone to give us a lead. Have you thought of a subject?
Yes. I should like to talk about venereal disease.
Oh. I don't think that would be quite suitable. We're a mixed post, you see.
Good evening, Mr. Shapley.
Good evening, Rosemary. This is Dr. Roberts.
Oh, how do you do? Aren't you going to lead our discussion group next week?
Yes, I hope so.
What's your subject?
We hadn't quite decided, but I'm sure the doctor will choose something of interest to all of us.
I think the subject I mentioned, Mr. Shapley, ought to be of interest to everyone.
Oh, what was that?
I wanted to talk about venereal disease. Mr. Shapley thought it wouldn't be proper.
When the Allies marched into Rome, somebody must have remembered that he had a past in the movies.
The job was to find out what the Italians were doing about film and tell them to stop it. So I was really given a huge office, a palatial office. It had been one of the fascist offices with marble floors and great columns and so on. No furniture, a chair and a telephone on the chair. If you want to sit on the chair, you took the telephone and off and put it on the floor. And there I received applications for making films which I turned down. Except that I think after about a year or so, I did get permission to approve one. I'm rather proud of this story. My Italian was very bad, but I read it, and it seemed to be unexceptional. It was a story of a partisan being tortured by beastly fascists, and the hero was a man called Marcello Pagliero, who was our interpreter. In fact, he had learned English as a waiter in Soho, and he was a very good interpreter and an actor at that particular point. And they took me to a nightclub where I was introduced to a very vivacious, dark lady who sang sort of sexy songs and kissed bald men on the top of their heads. And she was to play the leading lady, and that turned out to be Anna Mignani, believe it or not.
By the end of the war, Mackendrick reckoned he had had enough of propaganda. He gave up the safety of the advertising business and struck out on his own as a writer. He broke into movies at Ealing Studios, where Sir Michael Balkan was acting as father figure to a gang of unruly talents, and where the heart of the studio, what everyone called Stage 6, was really the Red Lion pub, where the studio emptied to talk and argue movies until closing time.